ChatGPT, I'm sure you've seen 10 billion videos already about that. I'm going to do my own rendition. Recently, I wanted to make a very quick piece of software that takes SRT subtitle files, removes all the extras from it, all the metadata, and then gives me just the text. I have a few replace regular expressions that I use in Notepad++ to make that happen usually, but it's a few steps, and I'd like to make it even faster. This is ChatGPT. You can sign up at the moment, and it is currently free, but who knows what will happen into the future. As I mentioned, the SRT files, for example, you can see here, you have this metadata we need to remove, so we're going to take this line out. We have to make a regular expression to fit that. Also the numbers and the empty space. The plan is to make this program relatively generic so it works with all of the subtitle files on YouTube. They have 3 different types. For example, in the website articles related to the videos that I make for my photography stuff, I like putting in the transcript of the video itself. So if a person doesn't want to watch the video, they can just read that. And having timing data in there doesn't make sense. It would just look terrible. You always want to save time, right? And that's what the goal is here, is to spend a little time to save time into the future. In this case, you look at YouTube, you can see they have SRT, which is what I tend to use, but they also have VTT and SBV. I'm going to be using Visual Studio, in this case, Windows Forms, WinForms, C#, .NET. I prefer that. It's what I know best, and it works relatively well for just simple applications. In this case, I'm going to call this TWOC. I'm probably going to release this as open source once I add all the different formats. And then it says different whatever's long-term version. I need a new computer. All this stuff is definitely taxing it. I've got a Windows Forms application. Very easy to use. You have your controls on the side here, and also properties for whatever you put on there. In this case, we're going to need a button. This is going to have us load a file. And let's add some type of visual. So we're going to need a text box. In this case, we will make it multi-line so it'll properly function with what we're trying to do. Let's put our scroll bars, read only. We can still copy from it, but we don't have any reason to edit this thing. Multi-line. So we need multi-line true. Currently, just going to resize it like that. My old way of naming these controls, you have like a small bit of text for what it is and then what it does. So BTN for button. Load subtitle file. Press enter so it registers, and then there's also a visual name here. I keep doing that. And to resize it. What you can do here is link things to the form, so when you resize it, it'll properly resize the inner controls, which in this case, I'll do that with the text display. But for the moment, I don't need to mess with that. There's a lot more you could do, but the goal here is just bare bones. When you double click on here, it's going to do the click event. It'll create a function for that. Let's think about what we need to do. We need to load a text file. We need to process the text file and display it. Very simple, but there are ways to do it. In this case, we want to use a background worker to make the processing not delay the interface. In this case, it's probably not a big deal because these files won't be huge most likely, but it's a good practice to have that idea, that mentality. First, we need to load a file. Then we go for it. We'll see if that's enough to get it done. So it says here's some sample code that demonstrates how to use open file dialog to select a text file and load it into String Builder. However, I did not specify a limit of the type of files. So I'll actually request that ChatGPT adjust the program to limit which types of files we want to load. Modify that code to limit files that the user can select, select, to .srt, .sbv, and .vtt. It says here is the modified code that limits the file to select those specific ones. In that case, it's going to be a little bit easier, faster, and more specific to what we're trying to do. Now, you don't need this, of course, but it is good to limit which files the user can select so that your program, at the very least, has the potential of getting the proper files to work with. I wish it were faster in generating responses. I don't know if this is a visual thing or it's a intentional, like token-based response thing. From what I've read that it does, it works on basically tokens. So in that case, maybe it actually does send it back like that. I only want a section of this. I don't want all the boilerplate stuff that it makes. There is another way to load the file with one line of code instead of using this while loop that it used, but you have to know that there's more ways to do it. So in this case, we ask it, is it possible to load the file into the string builder object with one line of code instead of what it initially gave us? It is struggling, so I'm going to let that do its thing. But in this case, we know some of this is good. We want the open file dialog object. Make a new thing. We add the filter. We've got the initial directory set to my documents, which is cool. I mean, that's fine. And then you have if the open file dialog.show dialog, which initiates the pop-up, is okay, which means the user selects okay instead of cancel. Then we get the string builder thing going, but I'm going to copy that. Go into our application. This is the main first thing that we're going to do. Paste this into here. Usually I don't put proper sentences into comments because it's just like added bulk you don't really need. So we had our brace in here that I did not copy. Let's save it. Run it. Open file dialog. It's limited to the subtitle files, SRT, SBV, VTT, which is good. Or you can select all files if you want. Yeah, cool. Thanks, ChatGPT. It did not work. It's dead. They're having issues with their systems. Everyone's using it. No surprise there. In this case, we've got some of what we want. It would be better if you have a running log of what's happening because it is capable of dealing with that. Open dialog. Exactly what I wanted. So in this case, we got the one thing, file.read all text, which is what I was looking for. You have to know that it exists to try to get it. That's what we want. But yeah. Anyways, okay, that's weird. So we have a string builder object, but we also need to have it properly referenced in this file. So we leave our mouse over here for 10 minutes and then there we go. So we need to make sure we have the proper using statement, system.text. If we didn't want to try to deal with threading, we could just do it in here, just let it happen all inside that button click function, but it's really not a great idea to do that. It gives us a generic background worker thing and yeah, do work. It says you need to make sure that the background worker has access to open file dialog object and that the object is not null and a file has been selected. You can also add background worker completed event so that you can do something after it finishes its task, which is what you need. And it's giving us quite a bit of information here. And it's knowing to give you generic functions, but based on, usually you're going to use a button to make that happen. That's good. And then it does this asynchronous call once the open file dialog has happened. It's worth mentioning that the background worker is an older way of running background tasks in .NET. You can also consider using task or async wait in newer versions of the framework, which provide more options and better performance, which I did not know because I haven't been doing programming lately. So I'm going to ask it to do that for me. Here's an example using this thing to use the task function. So there's a task.run, and then it uses, I think they're called lambdas or whatever, to make that happen. Is a method to use the new task that runs the code to read the file and create the string builder object. Then a wait keyword is used to wait for the task to complete and return the string builder object. You should also try a try catch loop to handle any exceptions that might occur. So I don't really like how that works. That might be newer potentially, but it keeps it all inside the button, which honestly, logically, I don't really like that way of doing it. It's a more modern way of running background tasks, and it's recommended to use instead of the background worker class, especially when you're working with newer versions of. Is there a way to indicate visually in a WinForm control the status? Yes, there are several ways to indicate the status of a task while it's processing in a WinForm control. One way to do that is using a progress bar control. You can set the minimum and the maximum properties to define the range of the progress, and the value property to indicate the current progress. You can also use a step property to increment the process bar value a specific amount, or the perform step method to increment. And then, okay, so in this case, this is what we needed to know, is that there's an invoke function to make the progress bar do a thing, and we're having it happen inside the task run and then perform step, which is to change the progress bar. So they do 100% in that. We wouldn't want to do perform step. We'd want to do something else, most likely. Can you use a label instead of the progress bar, where the label simply says loading file while the processing is happening in task, once asking it to simplify the code that it sent us, because the progress bar just takes a lot more stuff. Like open file dialog was the variable name that I specified early on. So it kept knowledge of that, and it's using it in this code. Label, invoke, it's emptying it out once we're done using a wait in this task. Task run, var, which is like a generic variable, in case you, for whatever reason, would want to do that. Using a try catch to deal with issues. You can pretty much just copy this. And a lot of this is like not useful, but we'll paste this in here. And also add a label. Let's call it LBL. Label loading, file loading status. There we go. So we got our label here. Paste that. We know that and that. We don't need this because ChatGPT gave us what we wanted. Oh, let's stay void. Let's try that. So we added async to this method. It still overloads this click event. We'll see if it works. And also, something I did not ask ChatGPT to do, but I might as well do it, is that we need to fill this text document, txt. Let's call it txt result display. If we go back to our ChatGPT and reference what it's doing with this progress bar. So it's using an invoke method invoker. We can copy that. So the reason I'm putting this in the task is that if the text were potentially very large, you still want to have that thing happen in the background. So it's going to fill that text box. It might take some time. And then it'll be ready. It'll finish the task. We'll be good. Pretty much all set. Let's see if this works. This thing loaded the file that we wanted. We haven't actually done any processing yet, but we know that we can load the proper file. And it works. I have a few regular expressions that work in Notepad++. The thing is, it might not be the same as in C#'s regex class. It's giving me a description, the Notepad++ regular expression that it says it captures timestamps of format that and replaces them with the same value. To use this expression, so it might not have understood what I was trying to do properly. There wasn't context in this case because the first time I had done this, I had context relating to what it was supposed to do. Use the replace function call to clear the line that matches the regular expression specified. So in this case, it understood what we want, replace it with an empty string instead of doing something else there. And it's giving us some more detail. You can tell ChatGPT not to give you those details if you don't want them. I'm going to paste this in. I'm just going to leave it as is for the moment. So this is fine, but also it doesn't deal with our string builder. Let's ask it to do that for us, even though I can do it myself if I wanted. So in this case, I say have that replacement work by traversing a string builder object. It's crazy, you know? It's impressive. So in this case, it says here's an example of using the function that it created earlier with a regular expression object line by line using a string reader object, which might make more sense. It says this way you can avoid creating a new array. Yeah. Okay. It's giving me an alternate, which is fine. I'll just copy it like that. So there are various ways to do that. You can use a while loop. You can use a for each loop. It is still referencing the code that it made earlier with the pattern and the replacement of an empty line. And it's appending to itself. Okay. Looking at what it's doing here is that it does the toString for the original string builder object. So we're getting a copy of that entire thing. And it's filling the string reader with that information. So at this point, SB is not needed anymore, but then it clears SB and it refills it with all of this. So it wants to use a try catch in here. Object, so we have potential exceptions that it didn't account for. Out of memory, object disposed exception. Okay, so then it says, yes, it's important to handle potential exceptions using the string reader.readline method. So it upgraded our code again. Let's go back here. Let's delete all that. Let's see if it used oh, it's still complaining. You know, it's close enough. So I think that is good. We can try it and see if it actually worked. You can see that it removed those timing lines from this. So we're almost there already. Looking good. What we can potentially do is just add a few more lines here. I don't really need to have ChatGPT do this for me. One here that removes the lines that are numeric. You can ask ChatGPT to give you all this information. So you'd ask it, remove this line from that file. Remove yeah, you know what I'm saying? So there might be another faster way to do this, but I really don't care. What we can do here is test this line to see if it's empty and not add it to the file. If it is, 3 tasks we need to do with this. We're going to replace that timing line. We're going to replace the number lines and then also remove empty lines. So we have a large block of text. In this case, I just wrote up a quick little extra bit. We're going to do that. Do the 2 patterns, one after the other. That should be fine. And then also make sure that the line being added to the string builder again is not empty. And if these 2 fail, we're still going to check to see if it's an empty line, because there could be empty lines that we'll take out. You could do some more logic to make this a little quicker so that if this one does happen, you won't have to do this one, whatever. I don't care. It's all good. There we go. Boom. Okay. Nice. We have the timing information gone. We have the number lines gone, and also the empty lines are gone. So we're set. I can copy this as I want, paste it in the thing, do whatever I want. I can save a new file. Boom, boom, boom. So the question is, could we use ChatGPT to do the other 2 things? Yeah, definitely. I'm not going to go over it because it's just like so much more, but I think we're good. You can see what a powerful tool this is. Very useful. In this case, I was relying on past programming knowledge to make it work well. If you were to do this without any knowledge of programming, you're going to have a hard time. You could potentially ask it to just make entire programs for you, which might work. I honestly don't know. I haven't tried it at that higher level. I think it's possible, but you still probably need some background knowledge to make it work exactly how you want. It is a very cool tool. Hopefully it stays free. Hopefully we get something like this, multiple versions, and like multiple companies, open versions of this where a person can use it and rely on it and have it fully available and free and easy to access and all that. It's using open source data. Like I think it was trained on GitHub, which I personally do have some code on GitHub, open source. So it would potentially use some of my code to make itself work. And I feel like they should try to keep this as a free, open, available resource for people. We'll see. Anyways, ChatGPT, very cool. Yeah. Scott of The Way of Coding. Hope you enjoyed this video. See ya.